talk, I just want to address a few points that have come up recently for me, and then hopefully have time for some questions if there. I see a few. Yeah. Okay. I've been. Hey, before I get going, is my volume okay? Yeah. Okay. I've been, getting quite a bit of sort of wisdom coming through my inbox in these times. You probably all have as well. Some of it's just really practical advice, and some of it's kind of a bit deeper and more general. And I wanted to share a couple of things with you. One is from a good friend of mine and sort of colleague in a kind of dream work that I've done called Roger Kamenetz. He wrote a really good book years ago called The Jew in the Lotus. It was a story of a group of rabbis going to visit the Dalai Lama in Dharamsala. And I strongly recommend it if anybody's interested in that kind of thing. And he's been working with dreams in a special way for years. And actually, he also wrote a very good book called The History of Last Night's Dream, which I also recommend. But here's a little message he put out lately. He said, I know we are all going through a narrow passage in time, all going through it together throughout the world. One of the great things we as a group have going for us is each other. As my teacher, Reb Zalman Schachter, who was a great rabbi, by the way, as my teacher, Reb Zalman, used to say, the only way we can get it together is together. And what has been sort of coming up for me is that we are in a really unusual situation, not only for the obvious reasons of this threat that's going around the world, of this coronavirus, and the collective response to it that's quite similar around the world, but also that we all know we're all going through. So it's really a global experience. And it has more and more been coming home to me that it's nothing other from the Zen perspective than a great global koan. It's one koan uniting us all, which is exactly what koans are all about. So I'm going to say a little bit more about that, but I want to go on with Roger just a moment because he's got another great point. It says sometimes people divide consciousness into inner and outer. And when a crisis happens in the outer world, they want to drop their inner work. Then we know they haven't gone deep enough yet to see how inner work informs, literally shapes our experience and provides a great resource for reframing and reimagining our experience. The first thing to do is our own work, to dig in deeply and take seriously our personal work. That is always the basis for working with others. Okay, now, I think, well, what came up for me around this point is that it's really easy to confuse inner and outer. I think we tend, very many of us, and I know I see it in myself, to really get muddled between inner and outer. And let me just try to parse out a little bit what I mean, that outer things will produce a reaction in us. And then that reaction goes kind of unseen and turns itself back outward so that we think all the more urgently we have to do something outward. Okay, as a bit of a mouthful, but maybe you get the point that typically what happens, and this is very much how Buddhism constructs human psychology, is that things happen. We have a personal inward reaction known as a mental formation or volitional formation. Without getting too technical, it means we have some kind of reaction within us to outer events. And then that drives us to react outwardly. But the inflection point, the intervention point, the point of growth and of healing is actually before that outward reaction takes place. It's with the internal reaction. That's what we need to work with. And so just to keep this really simple, it's a point I made on Thursday night, I want to make it again. That, commonly what people are experiencing a lot at the moment, of course this is not surprising. Yeah, there's certain amounts of frustration and there's certain amounts of disappointment and things, and sadness and grief over lost loved ones. Of course, that's a major, major thing. And of livelihood, the threat of loss of livelihood or actual loss of livelihood. It's all, for some people, it's a lot of very real pressing losses going on. But for many, it's about fear and anxiety. It may be both, but for a lot of people, it's more about fear and anxiety. And when they come up, here's a little plan of action. And you can do this throughout the day, just pause, close your eyes, you can try it now. Just tune into the breath, let it come as it comes, and then let it calm down a bit. And then look for the fear, the anxiety in the body. Most people, there's been research on this, great majority of people actually experience anxiety in the chest area as a body sensation. So we're looking for some kind of tightness, tension, contraction in the chest, perhaps a little lower in the solar plexus. Find that, and then here's a little plan of action. You can say to yourself, I feel fear. I feel fear. And then go to, there is fear. Fear is arising. Fear is arising. I'm aware of fear arising. I'm aware of fear arising. There is awareness of fear arising. There is awareness of fear arising. Fear is allowed. Fear is allowed. Fear is welcome. Fear is welcome. Fear is welcome. Fear is loved. Fear is loved. Fear is loved. So, you may have got a little shift from that or not. It's fine, either way. It's something you can practice. If we can learn to love our fear, it's quite important actually, because it means we're we're learning to identify just a little more with our capacity for loving awareness than with fear. And that's a form of growth. And you'll feel it. So please practice that as frequently as you care to, until you get this sense of there's a shift, and suddenly I'm experiencing from another perspective, another way of seeing things. It's quite beautiful. So keep at it until you taste that beauty. It's beautiful and it's real. There really is another perspective. Okay, so that's a little bit I wanted to share, sort of out of what Roger Kamenetz had to say. Then actually I got another friend. I got some, real nice writer friends who've been sending out messages. This is David Abram. Some of you may know of his work. He's a deep ecologist. He wrote quite an influential book called The Spell of the Sensuous. And he's been to Mountain Cloud a couple of times. Actually, I should have said Roger Kamenetz has also been to Mountain Cloud. So you're getting a little bit of Mountain Cloud faculty here. This is David Abram. Just a message that he sent out. Dear exquisite friends, dear creatures, I so hope you're keeping safe at this strange and difficult moment in the world's turning, that your loved ones are all taking gentle and loving care of themselves and of the wondrous goodness that surrounds them, that surrounds us, even and especially in this moment when fear nibbles and sometimes gnaws at our souls. For the last 2 days, I stepped away from the news. Well, there's another little practical pointer that we might all take note of. Give yourself a bit of news fasting every so often, or as often as you want. Maybe just touch in rarely. See what it's like to have days away from it. Just see. For the last 2 days, I stepped away from the news, lured by some fresh snow falling in the mountains above the town where I live. I glided off on my old cross-country skis into the forested slopes, consulting with the spruces and firs and the great aspen groves, dancing with gravity. I think he means on his skis, dancing with gravity, watching and listening to the roiling, shape-shifting clouds and the blustering winds. What spoke within me unexpectedly gave solace and a shadowed wonder that eased some of the ache and terror of this moment. The creaking tree trunks and the mountains and the thickening snowflakes cascading down like a blessing of peace were all whispering into my animal ears these last days. Actually, funnily enough, I've got a hunch that I was out in the same snowfall that he's talking about with T.S. Little, who some of you know. T.S. and I set off on a hike a few days back up the mountain. There's a popular trail up a mountain here, Atalaya. And we started going up that, and then we sort of just passed this little dry creek bed, going up a little drainage, a little valley. And we thought, that looks nice. And we just started walking up that off trail, higher and higher. And we wound up going up a sort of really, really steep, long face among boulders and scree and rocks, and kind of half scrambling, half walking, higher and higher, with a fairly spread out stand of pine trees, and it was getting colder and colder, and a mist came in. And it was late afternoon. I mean, we knew where we were. We weren't particularly worried, but it was a little unusual, and then snowflakes started falling, streaming down, sort of light, fairly small flakes pouring down. And there were gaps in this mist, so we could see below us the town and the freeway, no cars on it. And every so often, crows and ravens appeared, enjoying themselves. They seemed to quite like the stillness and the quiet, the human beings having gone quiet. And there was this sense of really entering another world that's always here, in a palpable way, this world of our actual planet, of our actual Earth, where we're not sucked into the human realm. We're really in the real world of Earth and its beings, rather than the world of humans that we get pulled into, news and media and culture and all of that. To know that all of that is fine and great, but to know that it's actually sort of embedded in, surrounded by this other world of non-human, or what David Abram calls more than human. We forget our more than human neighbors, he commonly says. And his whole sort of project is about reconnecting to our real context. And, I don't know, we're all living in different places with varying degrees of access to nature. I know that. And some of you may have very little right now. But it's here all the time anyway. We're made of it. Our bodies are made of the same stuff as the rocks and the trees and the clouds and the mountains and the rivers. We're all made of this planet, and it's going on in perhaps a sort of more peaceful way than, perhaps we have more chance to taste the more peaceful way in which it's going on right now. Okay, so there's a little bit from these different perspectives of other kinds of practice, really. Nature and dream work that Roger does. And coming back to the meditation and the particular gift to meditation of Zen koans. Their job really is to force us against our will a little bit into a position where there's no way out. That's what koans do. There's one old master in 11th century China who said that a koan was like a rat trap. Now, what he meant was they had these traps for rats which were made out of a hollow ox horn, and they would put a little dab of sweet oil and down in the tip of the horn, and the rat would want to get to the sweet oil, and the further and further it got itself down this conical horn, the more stuck it would get, until finally it was trapped in the horn trying to reach the oil and couldn't get out. And this master, Da Wei, said koans work like that, and believe it or not, he thought it was a very good thing. You might think, who wants to get stuck down the end of an ox horn? But from Da Wei's point of view, nothing could be better. He wanted us all to get jammed into a kind of existential trap that we couldn't get out of through a koan. It's a little bit like what's going on now. Whatever it is, the coronavirus, as I put out in a recent message from one of my Dharma brothers in the Philippines. He's called Rolly del Rosario Roshi. He said, the coronavirus is our true self. Our true self is absolutely one. It's one with everything. There is no way that the virus cannot be ourself. He's speaking from a deep level of experience, true enough that we may not all taste all the time, but it's there always. And a Koan wants us to get so stuck that the only way out is to find our truer nature, our deeper self that is all inclusive. So we become one with the track, one with the Koan, one with the rat, one with the horn, one with the sweet oil. And once we're one with anything, we're one with everything. The only way to become one with something is to discover that both it and us share this level where we're all one. You can't do it bit by bit. If you want to find that you're one with something, you will find that you're one with everything. Because the oneness is a property of all phenomena. You can't find it individually. You can only find it by finding the universal oneness. Okay, that's the job of a Koan. And that's, in a sense, I really am feeling that this very serious, I'm not belittling the situation in any way at all, the serious situation we're in is a Koan. It is exactly a very deep, global, all unifying Koan. And one manifestation of its work is pushing us into seclusion, each of us, each of families. And it's odd that, we talk about seclusion and isolation stuff, but actually I think for a lot of us, we're in isolation with others. Of course, some of us aren't, but many of us are, with family groups that perhaps aren't used to being together or weren't expecting to be together. And that brings its own little cluster of Koan work too, but very helpful challenges, to learn from, grow from. It's all about growth. That's our whole. That's really what I mean about the confusion of inner and outer. They're just really we're always, our whole life has put us. The very fact of existing as a human being has put us in a position where we can grow. We can grow. That's really what we can do. We can learn and grow. And what that we know when we're learning and growing, because what it feels like can be challenge, and then allowing in, and non-resisting, and then love. It's always some kind of repeated breakthroughs into love of some kind, deeper and deeper, I would say. In this sense, this discovery of great oneness is probably the greatest love we can find, because everything's together. All creation is together in one. And that's just an unbelievable condition of love that is here in our universe. And in fact, after one recent talk, somebody sent me a quote that love is the flame that starts the whole universe. That was a quote from Maya Baba. And what an amazing concept, what an amazing, perhaps, discovery we can each make. Okay, that's enough from Henry. So, because it might all get a little chaotic if we unmute everybody. So I'm going to look at...
Henry, stop the recording from the tissue.
No, why not? I'll just start reading some of these questions and comments.
I've got a couple, and I've sent them to you as private messages. One from Jeff, one from Aaron.
Okay, thanks. Yeah. Okay. So there's one here. Aside from Aaron, aside from our own embodiment of peace and equilibrium, how do you suggest helping others that are locked in a fear state? Okay, well that's a great question. The first response I would have is that it may not be that there's a blanket answer. It may be that this is a case by case thing. You have to feel out, the person you're with, and I would think probably listen. It's usually much better to listen than to talk. So let people find their own way to no longer resisting their fear. You see what I mean? We get locked through resisting. That little exercise that we did. And by the way, the wording of that, find what works for you. It's not a set script or something, But, you could maybe sense that the point there is to stop resisting it, to stop resisting our own contracted state. Because as long as we're resisting it, it's just another contraction. So how do we allow it? And I'm in this position of having been, asked to do some Zen teaching by my teachers, 10 years ago. But I don't know that certainly in my home, if I ever set myself up as any kind of teacher, we're heading for trouble. So I would be a little cautious outside of a sort of formal context like this of sort of playing a teacherly kind of role. I can tell you it does not work in my family. No way. It doesn't work with my friends. Thank God, really. And so be cautious about that. Okay, that's a response to that. Yeah. Okay, there was just a practical question about pain during or after sitting. My own take on this is try not to have too much pain. So in other words, try different postures, try different supports. Mostly, often, if you're on the floor, then it's about getting different heights. Try having the amount of height you have in what you sit on is crucial. Most people are okay with that kneeling posture where you're sitting and kneeling at the same time. If none of that works, get on a chair. Just make sure your lumbar has good support so it can have some arch in it. You shouldn't, if none of those things help, then go to a chiropractor or go to a body worker, a manual therapist of some kind. You may have, there was one guy I remember who early on in my teaching life, really like in the first year, I think, there was this guy who was just determined to sit, and it meant so much to him. And he tried it years ago, but had pain in his back. And he was actually a young priest, from a Catholic order. And he said, I'm just determined to do it. So I'm going to come to your weekend retreat. And it was all kind of big excitement and important for him. And he came and he just got excruciating back pain. And at first I was, as a novice teacher, I was saying, well, just sit through it. It'll probably change. And it just got worse and worse. And so eventually, and much longer than I should have taken, I said, maybe you should stop, lie down, and next week go and see somebody. And he did. He went and saw some kind of physiotherapist, and it turned out he had a real problem in his back. So watch out for that. Okay, I'm just going to look at others. I'm sorry, there was a little bit of a glitch actually with getting on this meeting. It started late and there was an error in the link. So actually, all of you found it, so that's not an issue for you. Okay. Is it advisable to have a care network in place to help members who may need help with shopping, etc.? Or is that a bad idea because of social distancing guidance? Well, no, I would have thought that's a great idea, but just practice appropriate precautions like wearing gloves or using hand sanitizer and that kind of thing when dropping things off. I think that's surely a great idea, but I also don't know that I'm the expert on that by any means. But I would have thought we should try to make things like that happen the best we can. Okay, it's a little after 11. Luke, what do you think? Should we wind up?
Yeah, I think before we wind up, I think I've sent a note to everybody in the chat, referring to please consider giving a donation to Henry directly for his time. This is not a Mountain Cloud event. This is an event that we're running through the kind of the Encinitas Zazen Sangha that has established over the past 5-6 years. Henry gives his time freely to us. So a suggested dana would be in the range of $10 to $20, and you can. Is that right, Henry?
Whatever anybody wants is just fine, and just being here is dana too. So.
And Henry can be paid. You can give him that donation through his Venmo handle, which is at Henry-Shukman, or his PayPal, which is henryshookman@gmail.com. We're kind of going on a week-by-week basis with Henry's involvement, whether it will be talk or Q&A or a reference to something specific. But we will be back here next Sunday at the same time.
Okay, I'm just going to say, I'm just reading some very, very beautiful comments, but I think they're not to everyone. So just suffice to say, this is, I think, very supportive for people to see others here in this gathering, sitting together. And may I just mention that, Mountain Cloud is a whole roster of sits, and you're welcome to join any of them. If you just go to the website, you'll get all the information you need. That's mountaincloud.org. And Mountain Cloud, as you may surmise, is facing a pretty drastic loss of revenue right now. So forget about me. Think about making a donation to Mountain Cloud if you'd like to. It would be really helpful at this time. We're trying to increase actually our offerings. And I think next Sunday.
Can I just touch on that, Henry? Because Johanna and I talked about that this week. If you choose to make a donation to Mountain Cloud, there is a button on their website, mountaincloudzencenter.org or mountaincloud.org. Just Google it and you'll find Mountain Cloud Zen Center Santa Fe. It'll come up. Donate to Mountain Cloud, not to Henry. If you choose to donate to Mountain Cloud, you can write a note in there or whatever, but differentiate it for their tax and financial purposes.
I think next Sunday we're talking about having a mini retreat, a half-day retreat, 10 till 1 Mountain Time. So watch this space, and we're going to be doing some weekend retreats coming up quite soon as well, which you can drop in and out of as you wish. They'll all be on Zoom, and we've got our Thursday night gatherings, which some of you I know already know about, and feel free to join those. Okay, that's enough from me. How about you, Luke? Are we done, do you think?
We're good. Yeah. Thank you, Henry.